Oh, good. All right, thanks for being here, everybody. Before we get started into news, I just wanted to mention, obviously, heavy hearts for the family of Avery Stark, the skateboarder who passed away over this weekend. And not only, we talk about kids in this community, every kid being our kid, and certainly in this position you feel that way, and especially so. This is part of a school family that at AK Suter that I'm a part of, and so just for everybody involved, and certainly we mourn such a tragic loss. So didn't want to talk about anything else before we mention that. We've got just a few news and notes that we want to go over. I'll give you some updates on facilities, some more detailed updates on as good a timelines as we can. Obviously, like anything, these things are a moving target. We got some City Hall testing and some remediation that will begin April 12th, and the timeline on completion is unknown. At the Pensacola Energy office, and Amy, I believe this is the one on the first floor here. Not at Atwood, but here we've got new windows installed, and once we're done in the other parts of the 7th floor City Hall, we will start with remediation in there. And as we said when we announced the closure before, the Pensacola Energy employees and our city attorney's office employees have been relocated. They've been working from those situations. That's working out just fine. So, we'll make sure that we get everything remediated. Floors 2 through 6 at City Hall, we're going to, we had tested some air samples just out of precaution, and they had tested normal, except for a small area on the 6th floor that was slightly elevated. So, we'll continue to move forward with that. And then at Malcolm Young, our consultant has completed the structural assessment, so that has been done, and we expect to have a report with recommendations this week. So that was, really the first question with the leaseholder, Lighthouse Christian, and ourselves is it safe to have people in the building? And we weren't going to take that chance without really knowing. So obviously that with the recommendations, that's what we're going to be looking at first and foremost is if there is a scenario of which it would be safe, where the structural assessment allows people to be in there, they feel comfortable enough to have people in the building, certainly that's something that we will then immediately discuss with Lighthouse Christian about if they wanted to be able to use it. If not, then we'll continue down that path. And also to reiterate, we have our Parks and Rec team has worked diligently with Lighthouse Christian in terms of finding them alternate locations for their sports and other things, and so we continue to do that as we speak. So, we've been as accommodating as possible given the inconvenience, and making sure that they have as little inconvenience for their operation as possible. Fire Station 4 is we've engaged a licensed environmental testing company to complete a mold assessment at 4 and to report to the city. An asbestos survey must be completed before any mold remediation plan can be formulated. So I don't believe we suspect that there's any asbestos, but given the time when the building was constructed, but that's just a necessary step that we have to take before we can get to the step we want to. So that survey for asbestos is scheduled for Wednesday, April 12th, and that'll take several days, and it'll probably have an answer back on asbestos within 8 to 10 days. And then once that is through, we'll be able to get a mold remediation plan. So, and then lastly, Bay Bluffs Boardwalk, we're waiting on a consultant to provide a scope of work to the city, and that's just on the boardwalk, obviously, itself there at Summit in Spanish. A few other things, just a reminder, the welcome sign artist interest meeting is this Thursday in this room from 9 to 10 a.m. And what we wanted to do is this is a project of pretty decent scale and pretty large scale, and we want to make sure we have any artists who are interested. We want to make sure that their questions are answered. How is there compensation? Yes, there is, and how that might work. questions about rights. Will they retain the rights to their art, and all the nuance that's kind of hard to put in a press release. We wanted to make sure that we had given an avenue for those artists to be able to ask questions. So Sydney Robinson's heading up this initiative out of our office, out of the administration, and of course on the technical side of things, we've got Public Works and James Cook and Amy and David and Dalrymple Salas to kind of be that intermediary of trying to make sure that we take this artist idea, this winning project, and have it come to life and make sure that it works on the technical side. We want a nice sign that's memorable and iconic for our community, but we also want to make sure it can stand up in the wind and all of the structural things that are important. And so it really is kind of an all hands on deck effort. So getting the word out for us, April 13th at 9 a.m. this Thursday for any artist interested in submitting a design. And the submission deadline is the 26th. So our goal was to make sure that they had ample time to come to that meeting and still have about 2 weeks to get something submitted to us. Wednesday, April 26th at 5 p.m. And anyone considering a submission, it's just submissions@cityofpensacola.com is where you send anything there. And I think, Casey, we can send questions there too, right? So if you do have questions about the application, anybody listening out there, you can also send that to that same email address, submissions@cityofpensacola.com. We have a Jefferson Street. We're going to close the Jefferson Street parking garage for on Sunday, May 14th to Tuesday, May 16th, between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. So we're going to do it overnight for those 3 days for annual maintenance. And this is an annual maintenance, but also you guys have heard us when we talked about parking before about the enhancements that are needed there that we're going to be investing in as well. So we got plenty of runway on that. We got about 30 days out, but obviously you can't leave your car overnight. So we'll try to continue to get that word out, even though it's a month out. We don't want to, have anybody leave their car in there between 11 and 5, and we'll have all the proper signage and notices at the garage. It would reopen on Wednesday, May 17th. So it would be Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., May 14th to May 16th. Let's see, a couple more things. I do have a District 6 Town Hall reminder is tomorrow at 5:30 at Bayview. Myself and Councilwoman Patton and a lot of our department directors and administrators will be there. This will be our third one, so 5:30 at Bayview. The last chance for the street sweeper naming contest, not that we need that many more names, I think we're at 1,600 and counting. So almost 550 submissions, so I guess, so a little over 1,600 names or so. So your last chance is to submit. If you've been saving that name and hoping nobody took it, you have till Friday, April 14th at 5 o'clock, and you got to submit them on the city's website. So we're excited about not as excited about going through 1,600 names, but we are excited about the overall enthusiasm. We'll figure it out, and we're certainly glad that the city has engaged this idea. And let's see. And last thing, the mayor's neighborhood cleanup. Our next one is Saturday, April 29th, and that is in the North Hill area, including portions of the surrounding neighborhoods. And so just make sure you check the cleanup map on the website if you're within one of those areas to confirm whether you will have yours on Saturday, April 29th. But that is it for news and notes for me. What questions you guys have?
Yeah. Mayor, could you give us an update on the hashtag connector, I wouldn't call it situation, but the plan? I think council's due to let another contract to a well-known company on this. Can you kind of give us the end-to-end picture of
Sure.
where we are and where we plan to go?
Yeah, and I mentioned in the CRA meeting yesterday, obviously I've got a lot of experience in this particular project because I was part of the project when it was born in 2018. And the action that was taken at the CRA yesterday really is ultimately tied to ensuring that through 5 years of time in many different iterations in value engineering and all proper things to do, I want to make sure that before we were to commit to something, that the original authors of this who had visioned the entire waterfront have an opportunity to say, okay, well, we're okay with this value engineer, we're okay with this. Hey, someone might have forgotten 4 years ago. So it truly is kind of a quality control check from the original envisioning to make sure that we haven't gotten too far away from amendments and deviation. Honestly, the answer is I don't know, and I think I remember the 2018 one, and I've seen ours, and certainly there are differences. Not because I think anybody was trying to change the philosophy. Some of it's probably functional. I mean, it would not surprise me if Scape looked at this project and said, "Hey, as it sits right now is exactly how we would do it." I mean, that is possible. It's just that gives me enough assurance that for all the time and money and public input and all of the things that were invested originally in 2018 to ensure that the spirit of that has not been lost through good, diligent work and value engineering and trying, so there's two things happening here. There's the original vision of it, and there's trying to make sure that it is an executable project. And I just want to make sure that those two things are married before we start spending significant dollars on it. So that was the action yesterday. But we do have dollars set aside. We're also looking at other potential funding sources through the state. We were encouraged to see that there looks like there might be a $200 million one-time injection on what's called the Florida Sun Trail, and that injection is meant to fund unfunded portions of the Sun Trail throughout the state of Florida. Well, our unfunded portion through the City of Pensacola is the end of the 3-mile bridge to the start of the Bayou Chico Bridge, which is right through the middle of town and through the middle of the hashtag project. So, the second, the night that came out, and I called Janice and Alex and I were calling Janice and Doug Broxson and saying, hey, if there's $200 million around there, for a sun trail that runs right through where hashtag is, there's that potential opportunity. So we haven't made any progress on that, and frankly, that hasn't been formalized at the state level yet. But that's something that we're eyeing long term. Is and the sun trail funding can't necessarily support the street, but it can support some of the things off of the street. So that's just one opportunity. We don't know. We're not counting on that. That has nothing to do with the action we're taking with Scape. We have to move forward with the money that we have right now. We can't count on what ifs, but that is, an interesting thing that we're going to be tracking, of course, and try to make sure we advocate for that. And that could be help fund potential some of the parts of Phase 2. And if hashtag the east-west connector on Cedar Street was made to be a pedestrian first street. I mean, take a road right now that doesn't see a lot of car traffic. And so, what do we do for Phase 2 of hashtag? Well, some of the solution might come through potentially some of the state funding. So two different elements of your question, but kind of the short term is let's make sure that we are still aligned with what the community's vision was for hashtag as best we can, and make sure that adapts with being able to get it executed. And then the second part is starting to look for any possible funding sources to continue to grow it.
Does the contract back to Scape for this value, this QA check, will it include any sort of public participation? I don't want to say it won't. I don't believe so, because obviously there's been significant public participation, beforehand. Where we're at right now is we have design plans for Phase 1 of hashtag. That's where we are. So in other words, we have incorporated that, and we are now at the point where we want to say, hey, give us a check and make sure that this. So in a way, us doing this is ensuring that the community feedback that was given, and remember, it wasn't just in 2018. There's been a lot of different community feedback. The city had its own community feedback portion during this project once it had moved along throughout the years as well. So at the end of the day, we all want what's best for the community and to optimize this project in the best way possible. So that's the intent of the action taken yesterday at CRA.
And then just to follow up on that, is with the rising cost of construction and everything, is there enough money in the budget to do what Phase 1 is?
Yeah, the magical question, right? I wish that we all had an answer to, but we have enough money in the budget to make an impact. But I'll give an example. The way that it was originally designed might have been outside the curb lines, with sidewalks and then with trees, with all of those things. Well, there's a lot of circumstances outside of our control, like what's under the sidewalk, and what are you going to charge us to find out what's under the sidewalk, right? Whether it's old utilities, things like that. And so yes, is there a way that we can take some real positive action with the funding that we have for phase one right now? Yes, we do believe that we can do that. But on the long term, things like Sun Trail, things like other accentuating things that could come along, obviously, that could bring into play, other things that might have had to be value engineered out. So no. To attempt to answer your question here, what I'd tell you is, yes, we have enough funding to make an impact with phase one of hashtag as it sits today, but that's a sliding scale of what you're leaving in and what you're taking out based on funding as well. So, but this is not, we wouldn't engage SCAPE at this point if we weren't ready to do something, because we would find ourselves in the same scenario, right? Because they would quality control it, and then if we didn't have enough funding, we'd wait a couple more years, and then be back where we are. So we feel confident enough moving forward with it to go ahead and do this QC. But we'll what ends up coming from that, we'll have to just see versus what we had proposed in 2018.
What do you think the timeline is on actually seeing the first phase of construction?
I can't speak to that. I can probably get you that answer. I don't want to put a deadline on anyone that doesn't exist. But we're, again, I reiterate, we're looking at this part of it right now, which we see as the closure between the design we have and ensuring that it meets the original vision as best as possible. And I would think the next likely step from there is to start, moving forward with it and getting it bid out. So I wouldn't want to hold us, accountable to an exact date, but progress is imminent, I would tell you.
Mayor, speaking of Cedar Street, do you have sort of an update on the Balin slip work that was scheduled?
Yeah, not much, not a substantial update. I mean, what I'd tell you is some of the things we've been spending our time on at Balin Slip is before we go invest money into any kind of construction down there. There was damage that took place in that slip. I know our team had put together a dive assessment to look at the seawalls in there, and we've been in that process now. And David and Amy could speak closer to that. I don't want to speak wrong on details on that, but I know that was a hurdle that we wanted to take on first before we were to ever start constructing something on a seawall that could have a potential issue. So I would say that progress towards getting something done at Balin Slip is happening. It just isn't in the form of necessarily going out and starting to put pilings in. It's more so in making sure we had other ducks in the row there that we had to get that we wanted to feel confident moving forward. So, but that dive assessment has taken place, and we've gotten some feedback from that. Is that fair to say? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Amy Tootle, our Public Works Director, we got a lot of Public Works questions today. So yeah, why don't we?
Balin Slip little parking area is part of the hashtag. I mean, does that come through there?
Well, technically, the original Cedar it goes west to Cedar. It doesn't necessarily go south to where the cul-de-sac is, and then it goes through the crepe myrtles there. That's where it was envisioned before. Not necessarily that it goes south, even though that is public access, public use that goes down. It was actually to take all of Cedar and turn it into kind of like in front of the YMCA, more of a VUNERF pedestrian first kind of thoroughfare where you could close it for festivals and things like that. That was the original intent, I know, but Amy can speak to details on both the Balin Slip. Well, we've had a few different questions on hashtag as well.
Sure. In terms of Balin Slip, right now we have a couple different things going on.
Here you go. I got you.
Thanks, Mayor.
We have a couple different things going on. Right now, currently underway is the cathodic protection project, which was as a result of the Hurricane Sally damage. So we have that going on where they're going back in and reestablishing the cathodic protection along the whole seawall, along Balin Slip and back around through Palafox. Then we have the Balin Slip Palafox Marina project in terms of getting the design consultant out there. We did do the dive assessment. Now we're moving into the next phase where we have the design consultant out there going to look at that area in two different phases. Phase one is the area which we traditionally call the bay and slip back in that corner, which was the wishes of the council to go in and put in maybe kayak slips and other boat slips. So that is phase one. They're designing that, and that's underway. Phase two is the rest of the Palafox Marina and the design of that. They're going to be doing that concurrently. And once those are done, and then we have a really good idea of a cost estimate for construction, then we'll have to revisit and determine what we can and cannot do.
And then on the hashtag, in terms of funding and.
Sure. In terms of hashtag, as the mayor has stated, we are going to have SCAPE kind of go back and take a look at the intent of the project to make sure that we are still following the intent of what it was originally kind of coming to fruition many years ago before we proceed on that. Like with anything, we feel we have it down now to a project that would be something that we could get constructed, bid out and constructed, but we with everything as it is with construction, we just don't know until we get out there and get it out on the street. But right now, the first step is to have SCAPE go back and look and make sure that the intent and the spirit of the design and what it was meant to be will then match up with what we have now in terms of the design plans that we have that are we're able to go out and bid out again if that's the case.
I'll stick with the water theme questions. I guess the Maritime Park Marina looks like it's pretty close.
Aiming to stay up here.
Well,
Yeah, well, what I can say to that, and Amy can answer any of the technical timeline questions, but our biggest concern right now is making sure that we have the operation of the day use marina in gear before we open the day use marina. And what I mean is, this is free day use slips. We're talking about issues like derelict boats being left, and whose jurisdiction is that. We're looking into potentially making it, the port's designation, that we designate that where that's something that now the port and its rules with derelict boats, the city's got to protect its asset and make sure that we don't have any, and not just from a damage standpoint, and we're looking at all of that. We actually have PPD putting in cameras, down there and all those kinds of things. So we just don't want to open it just to open it a week or two early. But in terms of construction itself, and Amy can speak to the timeline, but I mean we're pretty much at the end of of it being ready. So there's no delay in construction. It's a self-inflicted delay to make sure that when it opens, that it's going to function properly, and that we have enough authority and that we've got the jurisdiction to make sure, because there are challenges with free and day use. Means not only is it free, there's no revenue to help offset operation, but also it's day use. It's not overnight at this point. So that means boats have to come in during the day and leave in the afternoon, and that presents its own challenges of how you enforce that and those kinds of things. So we're working on that now, and I feel real good about our progress, that we're going to get somewhere in pretty short order. So but we've had conversations across all fronts: police, port, public works, administration. There's a lot of irons in the fire when it comes to this project and making sure that it works properly when it opens.
Mayor, that's an exciting project. What was the thinking that you said is going, when you develop policy for this day use marina, that this would be better suited as a port asset instead of a parks asset?
Well, because there's additional rules in place as a port asset that allow us to enforce.
You mean current rules in place?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I mean, with it being a function of the port, the same way that the port has its own rules that wouldn't be the same rules as the dock at Bayou Tahar, in terms of how you enforce, or if someone left a boat and we can't find the owner, there's going to be more rules in place to protect a port asset that are just already on the books. Now, we're we're looking at that. We're looking at ordinance. That's obviously the other option, is to say, and we're having conversations with the city attorney to say, are we protected enough with a city ordinance that says you leave your boat after 7 days, we can do X, Y, and Z? Is there enough protection? And you just have to look. And obviously, there's issues with derelict boats in Bayou Chico that are causing problems, and we just want to make sure that we're out ahead of that as best we can. The port designation, that's something that we probably could do a little bit faster than getting an ordinance done, but we could turn that on and potentially turn that off if we thought. And so our goal is to get this open, but get it open in the right way. So we're looking at every option that again allows us to enforce the operation in its intent, which at this point, and based on the grant that was given, is for free of charge and for day use only. And so that's what we're in the process of now, and we're not trying to do that after we've already opened it.
On the subject of policies for something like this, in many cities that have these kind of facilities where you could boat up, I'm thinking Inner Harbor, Baltimore,
Yep.
Charleston, different places. The parks operate those, and almost in all cases, they have vendors, because the people, families or whatever, coming by boats,
Yep.
they want to take something back with them, food, light food services, something like that. Have you thought about, would there be a day when there would be vendors leased or operated in or near that section of the park?
I think we'd be open to all options. If we looked at, from a resilience standpoint and an water activation standpoint, if we looked at a mooring field one day, well, you'd have to have somewhere for folks to come in from a mooring field, and normally there'd be some kind of building or some kind of operation right there. Obviously with the development plans at Maritime Park, we'd have to, look at that. But if you're asking me philosophically, I'm absolutely open to that. And as a matter of fact, I would take it a step further and say, I think some of the most engaging parts when I visit other cities, I think of Savannah, for example, and their main park is they have third-party leased, there's a restaurant in the middle of the park. You activate their spaces, and not that you would do that everywhere, but there, locations like you're mentioning, make some logical sense to say, hey, when you get off the boat or before you get on, that you'd have some kind of activation. But frankly, I'm just thankful to start. I used to say this during the campaign all the time. I said, if I was running for mayor in Iowa, what I would do to have the waterfront like this. And it's really not activated, And so I'm excited about this day use marina because it really truly is our first scaled activation where you can get on a boat from Pensacola Beach and you can come enjoy downtown, And, we'll work through all of the hurdles of the operation, but that's an amazing first step for us is to think that we've got this amazing downtown that we talk about and brag about all the time. But if someone wanted to take their boat from, Alabama or down the intercoastal, we really have very little option for you, And so this is an economic development thing like so many others are, It's access to our waterfront is an economic development measure that helps us grow our community and helps our local small business owners, to have more people interacting with our town. So I look at that, and in the long term, I'm always looking for opportunities to help engage community and visitors into coming to visit us.
Bruce Beach update. Bruce Beach.
I'll let Amy give that one. I know we're close. That's the only update you have from the mayor. She can give you a better one.
Connected to the slips and everything like that.
Well, I can answer that. It will be connected through the pedestrian bridge that is already there. I mean, so technically, yes, you would be able to walk from Bruce Beach, but you would go through Maritime Park, then turn south around Nick's Boathouse there. But right, exactly. So you'd be able to walk there, but yeah, in terms of the slips, they'll be where you could see them right now over on Maritime. But Amy can give you an update on timeline.
Sure. Bruce Beach Phase 1 construction is moving along nicely. We expect to be done this summer. Concurrently, we have Bruce Beach Phase 2 design underway, and that should be done actually within the next month or two. And so the intent is, hopefully, as Bruce Beach Phase 1 construction is winding down, we'll have Bruce Beach Phase 2 construction bid out and have a contractor on board, so it'll be more of a seamless transition between Phase 1 and Phase 2. Club Street reconstruction, that's already been bid out and awarded, so our contractor is going to be out there in the next week or two to be out there to redo Club Street. So that will be complete, and so that'll be a nice new road right there leading into Bruce Beach. So.
See, she's got all the answers. Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the casting flights issue. I know the workshop now is off and you're working on an ordinance.
Yeah, so I reached out to the council executive and said, this is something that we've been trying to find a smart, holistic solution for downtown, not just for one place. Not we don't operate, and it's not fair to operate as a city, doing something or not doing something based on the situation for one individual or one business owner. But I would say this coming up over these last several months has also allowed us to take a look, inward and say, what works in terms of what our policies are and what doesn't. And so, we think we're pretty close, and that we expect to come at the end of April with something that, a proposed ordinance that I think adds a little bit more clarity to how restaurants operate downtown. So what we didn't want to do is have a workshop that when we already have an ordinance that we think might, bring some solutions. It would be 72 hours later that would be coming to council. So I just respectfully asked the council executive to say, hey, let's hold off, let's look and see if this is a solution that makes sense. And if it doesn't, and it's not something that makes sense, then it's no issue with a public workshop. Just, we're at the 11th hour of finding a solution here that I think makes a lot of sense for us. Then let's do that first before we, dive into a public workshop that really we wouldn't even have any time to react to based on the ordinance already being on the agenda and in play at that point. So it's really a timing thing. As I said, if this is something that we don't think is palatable for us, or our council doesn't think is palatable, no problem. We'll go through the meeting on the 27th, and then after that, if they want to hold a public workshop, certainly support that 100%.
Do you have the details of what the ordinance would be hammered out yet?
Not every detail, but what I'd tell you it's focused around is kind of redefining what a restaurant, how the city code defines a restaurant. And right now, it's tied more to the state definition of a restaurant, which in an SRX license, which is 151 seats minimum. And then, of course, to have the SRX liquor license, you have to sell 51% food. So that is what we've always kind of taken that definition in terms of the code of whether you're a restaurant or a bar and tied it to that. Understandably, I mean, that makes sense. That's a state definition. But there's also restaurant permits that, you can get a restaurant permit from the state of Florida with 10 seats, with 30 seats, with whatever you want, and be considered a restaurant. So we're evaluating and analyzing, does tying our definition to a restaurant, does it really matter what liquor license you have if you are permitted and inspected the way a restaurant would be inspected? So instead of looking at 1 bar per block and 2 bars per block, there's already some, questions around, it's an archaic code, and fixing that or manipulating that, I don't know that would be the best solution, and that might be fixing one thing for one person and not for another. The direction we're going right now, I feel like that's a positive step for the community in that, this could allow restaurants. I mean, you think about, you go to cities all over the country that, can have a restaurant that they can serve liquor in there, but they only have 50 seats or 40 seats. And someone, again, who's put every single cent in their name to building a building and can't believe how expensive it is to do, that makes a big difference to not have to say, hey, if you'd like a restaurant on Palafox, you got to have 151 seats and you got to have, to serve liquor there. And so that's a pretty tall order. I mean, it's really kind of a parallel to the food truck conversation, is that I like the food truck development because that allows us to build a culinary culture here in Pensacola without requiring someone to spend millions of dollars to take that chance, right? They can test that model, make sure it works, make sure that people enjoy their food, and then they can go invest. I think this is really in the same vein, is to say, hey, if you want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a 4 COP liquor license and you want to should we also, for you to be able to use that, and if you are licensed as a restaurant in the state, should we hold you to the same state minimums of an SRX? And so it's just allowing the owner potentially to either have an SRX liquor license or a 4COP liquor license, a very expensive one, but not be limiting that the only way you could do that is that you have an SRX with 151 seats. So I think it opens the doors for a lot more folks, and really I think it's a good update that makes sense. And our planning department, Leslie, Sherry, David have been working on this for a few weeks now at least, and and that's what we wanted. Is we didn't want to rush at the 11th hour into a reactionary decision on code that is in perpetuity. We wanted to take a look at the whole element here and try to come up with what we think is a good positive step for everyone. So that's why that's taken some time, but we're getting to the end of what we will propose as a solution. So again, I'm not discouraging public feedback or public comment. I'm certainly we've heard a lot of public comment around the one particular location you discussed with some accurate, some not so accurate, but nonetheless, we're here. We think we've arrived with something that could work, and let's play this out first before we go back into more public comment.
Have you spoken to the owner in Cascade Place to tell them this ordinance?
I haven't yet. I'm not, and I can't speak for staff if they have or not, but we intend to. Obviously, we would want to give him that update the same way if someone had inquired about any kind of issue at the city. Certainly we would be happy to respond to him and let him know that what we were thinking about.
Mayor, do you have any update on the, I guess it's Mr. Dickinson's youth soccer group? They had not completed the MOU. He told us they were waiting on a board meeting, and the board meeting was to have been in March. Do you have an MOU from them now?
We do. So we're trying to have it ready for this Thursday, that you would have seen on the agenda on Monday, but just from a logistical standpoint. So we have an MOU in place with, I believe, is it SYSA? Is that the other one? Yeah. So the last two were Southern Youth Sports Association and Pensacola Soccer. So we have those signed and in hand. So it's just a matter of getting them in front of council. And just from a timing standpoint, we weren't able to squeeze them in for this meeting in terms of when we had them.
Are they consistent with the others, like soccer, $10 a head, or SYSA consistent with the other football, basketball?
They had some questions. So what I can tell you accurately is that that it is consistent. They had some questions about the release of public information of minors and some things like that they were concerned about. But in terms of what I can tell you in a general sense is that the general structure of the agreement is not any different than the agreements that you've already seen. So, and just as a reminder, our goal is that a year from now, not all of these should look the same. Meaning, some people are using fields more, some people have more kids signed up. So, it's to get everybody on the that we all have an MOU and we all are have something, or we can look each other in the eye and have an agreement. And then phase 2 of this is to ensure that we have things that make sense. If you have more wear and tear on the field, you might have a different cost. If you use the field for a less for 3 months instead of 6 months, might have less of a cost. So we're going to look at all those things, but that would have been almost impossible to do. We thought that the need of getting those MOUs done was much higher than working out every little minutia detail around every one of these leagues ahead of time. We thought this would be the right step 1, step 2.
The last time you talked in this room about those, you said you were more interested in getting these things done than looking backwards on past due accounts and balances. With these last 2, is that still the policy? You weren't going to try to, if any money was owed from the past, you weren't going to try to bring that current?
I can't. I'm not sure what our conversations between Parks and Rec and the leagues have been, and it's not so much saying I think if we all agree on that there was something that was owed, and I can't even speak to if either of these leagues have anything owed. So I don't want to speculate, but we think if we're in full agreement of something that's owed, certainly, we would be asking for that. What we were saying is if there was ambiguity that was left because of a lack of an MOU at all, or things from 3 and 5 years ago, that my comment previously was really more like, let's look forward in terms, it's probably not even worth the accounting to go back and track at $10 a player, what someone might have owed 5 years ago versus let's just all be on the same page right now moving forward. So I still have that philosophy, but in terms of those specific two, I can't speak to if they even owe anything or what our conversations have been with them about that. And then now that Amy sat down, I'll give one quick update on the. We're continuing to move forward with a actual structural overhang at Graffiti Bridge. So if we're going to try to figure out to be the administration that can stop trucks from hitting the Graffiti Bridge, we've told you from the beginning. Our phase one of that, to our point about the MOUs, the phase one of that was to officially make it a no truck corridor. And as I joked, I get all the emails of everybody saying the mayor just put a no truck sign up and thought that no one else was going to hit the bridge. That's not what we said. What we said was we want to get it on Google Maps, on Waze. We want to get that formal no truck corridor up and going and not wait for something tangible and structural. But I know Amy and her team have been working on our plan is to go to council on April 27th for the funding portion of getting the structural overhangs that you'd see, something that with an arm and, in essence, chimes that would come down and warn drivers before they get both northbound and southbound before they get to the Graffiti Bridge. So we're taking our best shot to end the trucks hitting the bridge. And no timeline on, you'll hear about the funding on April 27th, but we couldn't give you a timeline at this point because at that point, then we got to go procure materials. We got to get it all, so I couldn't give you an exact time on when they would actually go in. But the step one is getting the funding sorted out, and so that's what we plan on doing on the 27th.
Yeah, how much it will cost?
I believe the proposed range of cost is about $140,000. Yeah, for design and construction. And if that sounds like a lot, I agree. But there's a lot that goes into that. It's a state road. What kind of materials can be over that to design something that's going to stand up? That's going to, So it's surprising, but really, in this job, it's not surprising. There's a lot of expense to a lot of things, but add up all the time that we've spent with police. Call it save our citizens from themselves or our visitors from themselves. How much cost has gone into, out of the pockets of citizens who, weren't trying to do anything wrong, and the thousands of dollars that they've spent. So you start looking at the ROI from that standpoint. $140,000, we could probably make that up pretty quick between all of the opportunity of people to hit that bridge and all of the resources we spend on that the rail company spends on that, and the citizen themselves spend on that. We could probably make up that. Unfortunately, we can make up that 140 pretty fast, I think. So, so I think it's money well spent.
Graffiti Bridge gives new meaning to the word placemaking, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, we just want you to get under it. That's all our, and so we're working on that, and and we've got a great relationship with the rail company owner there that's owned it for a couple of years, and they've been real helpful with us on this and other projects that we've had a lot of good conversation with them. So we're excited to continue to move the ball forward on trying to end the strikes of the Graffiti Bridge. I can never say it'll be that it's 100% certainty, but we think that this step would get us as close as we've ever been. So, anything else? Yeah.
Serious note.
Uh-huh.
We know during April Fool's you talk about Trader Joe's and
Yeah.
everything. And then you go to Tallahassee and stand in front of Trader Joe's. People at my station would ask, when can you get a Trader Joe's?
We'll get. Yeah. Let me think of the mayoral political answer to not answer you. No, look, I would love to have any development, and frankly, I got enough emails about it. I probably should fly to California and hang out at the front door and see if they'll take a meeting. But look, business at that level, we know it all comes down to metrics. Whether that's an airline that wants to bring a route here, there's so much data involved in that, and they're going to look at household income, they're going to look at public safety, they're going to look at traffic on whatever road that and so it's a little bit of out of our control, but certainly if Trader Joe's is watching, they can give us a shout, and I know that'll certainly get us some positive support. And a good April Fool's joke is supposed to be realistic. That's why if you don't read past the first 3 paragraphs, it sounded realistic. So anyway, we had fun with that, but certainly happy to take their call whenever they're ready. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.